Now it's our pleasure to have as our speaker today Reverend Brian Walker, our spiritual leader. So take it away, Brian.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Jan and Nina, for that lovely music. So happy Independence Day, everyone. It is the 4th of July, and we celebrate that. So as this image kind of projects, for most of us, that means, some fireworks, and maybe there's a barbecue and hot dogs or whatever our favorite is. And it's fun, and we have a good time, and holidays are always important to be able to share together with friends and family. I think it's also important to ask what do we celebrate? Well, we celebrate the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and it's the date from which we count as the birth of our freedom in this country. And so I just want to say a word or two about the Declaration of Independence. For us, for Americans, it's like American scripture, American civil scripture, and it's had a really tremendous impact on American history. And probably the most important phrase, which I'm sure that all of your sentence that I'm sure that all of you have learned, certainly have heard many times, and probably learned by heart in school, is that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so that ideal has been so important. In fact, some historians say that it's the most important political document and sentence in American history. And you could even make the case that it's really resounded internationally, because many countries have used this as a model when they've gone on to write their important documents and constitutions, etc. So I'm going to talk today not about our American freedom, but about our spiritual freedom. And so I want to share an image with you. And this image is of a winged globe that was first used in Unity times on a magazine cover in 1891, which of course was right at the very beginning of the start of the Unity movement. The image itself goes back to Egyptian and Chaldean times, and of course it can be interpreted in different ways. But basically, it's about the globe that represents this three-dimensional world, and the wings rising or taking that up. And so it's a symbol of the ascension of human consciousness, is one way to interpret it. And even though it hasn't been used a lot in Unity history recently, it was trademarked in August of 1971 at the Unity World headquarters as the Unity Village logo. So it still speaks to us today. And I'm looking on it about it as our unity, and even kind of new thought to extent, but certainly unity. It's our declaration of our freedom. And I think you can see printed below there, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So like that other statement in the Declaration of Independence, this is such a critical truth for us, that you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So it's important, I think, to ask the next obvious question, then what is the truth? What is the truth that is going to liberate us, that's going to make us free? And what it is that there is only one. Whatever you want to call that, whatever you want to name it, there's only one, whether you call it God, or you call it the field, or it goes nameless, or just it's the mystery. That is the fundamental truth. In fact, that was what our unity principle says today, our first unity principle, that there's only God, an essence in the world, and that we are an expression of that one, the essence of which is love. So that's the truth. And when you awaken to that dimension in yourself, it really causes a paradigm shift. It gives you an opportunity to look at your life from a completely different perspective. That you aren't this isolated little body-bound human being, but you are an expression of the divine love that is the essence of the universe. And so that you are not, there's nothing that limits you. You're not bound, trapped, or limited in any way. Like we sing in the song, that to release and let go. So that's the part of yourself that you want to discover, and the part of you that is free. And it's not free at some time in the future. It's free right now, because the essence of who we are is spiritual. And that's the truth. And that is so profound and so important. You know, then the next question that comes up for me is, well, you know, why don't I experience that all the time? Well, so we're really attached to our separated conscious ego. And so that keeps us, for the most part, in this awareness of that I'm separate, and I'm Brian, and I have this body, and I have these thoughts and these feelings, and that I'm attached to a lot of stuff. And so, so that's the thing that really keeps me from really knowing the truth of my being, that I'm spiritual and that I'm free, and that this spiritual freedom is innate, and that there is nothing that can be done to change it. You know, many of you know that I worked at Silent Unity for many years and prayed with a lot of people. And so we would frequently get calls and prayer requests from those who are fighting addictions. And of course, we had our prayer book, and our prayer book was categorized into different categories. And one of those categories was freedom. And so if you would call up with somebody, very commonly to call, get a call from people who were alcoholics and utilizing the 12-step program. And so they would tell us about their circumstances. And so we would pray a prayer that goes something like this. Right where you are, your freedom exists. Right where you stand, God stands with you. The Spirit of God within you is not bound by unwanted habits, thoughts, or feelings. You are blessed with peace, power, wisdom, and health. Through the Christ in you, you are free. Now we would I won't speak for anybody else, but I would really feel really empowered by praying that prayer with somebody, and to know the truth of their being and affirm that for them. And of course, as we all know, you can't do that. You can't do something for somebody else. You can't pray for somebody else without feeling that feeling yourself. Too often, though, when we when we get a feeling, a special kind of feeling, our culture really encourages us to approach it like this. But that, of course, is really not what we want to do. We really want to be open and to know the truth of our being. So let me tell you a little story. This is a story about a woman named Diana Winston. And so at the age of 14, Diana was going through some kind of stressful times, and she'd be working in the summer, actually doing some babysitting and some house care for somebody that she knew, and it was kind of stressful. She had several kids to take care of. Anyway, one afternoon she went out, we had a little break, and just laid down in nature and laid down on the grass. And to her shock and surprise, she had this overpowering experience that was timeless, that she felt was just an experience of love, and that she couldn't describe in words. And so while she was having this really overpowering experience, she thought to herself, I feel so much love that I can't hate anyone. And so she deliberately put that to the test and said, who do I hate? And the person that immediately came to mind was her best friend's brother named Rex, her older brother, and who used to always tease them and pick on them whenever she went over to her friend's house. And she thought to herself, I hate Rex. But that didn't resonate with her. She couldn't even generate that kind of feeling of any kind of hate or even dislike for Rex. She loved Rex, and that was just a feeling and an experience that was just kind of overwhelming for her. And so move the clock ahead about 6 years, when she is 20 years old, and she's traveling in Southeast Asia, and she comes across these people who are teaching meditation. And she discovers this form of meditation that's called Vipassana, or insight meditation. And so she goes and she tries this Vipassana meditation that she really likes and has a very strong experience with. And so she starts going on these retreats, and sometimes for multiple days, and spends a long time in silence, a lot of time meditating. Well, this form of meditation became her passion. And after she'd been doing this for some time, she actually went to a monastery and took vows to become a nun, which meant that she shaved her head every day. She ate all her meals before noon. She slept on a concrete floor with a thin mat, and spent many hours of every day sitting and walking meditation. And so she persisted in this almost obsessively, that she really wanted to make progress, and she really wanted to capture this experience that she'd had before. She was so dedicated and so passionate that she spent so much time meditating that she cut her sleep down to about 4 hours a night. Well, after she'd been doing this for some time, she had a spiritual crisis. She couldn't meditate, she couldn't think, and she just cried a lot. I guess it's what we would call a really kind of a mental breakdown. She was so desperate that she wanted to tell her teacher that she was leaving. And so she made an appointment with him, with her teacher, who was the head of the monastery. And he was one of the most highly respected teachers in Burma, where she was. But he was also very hard-nosed and a rather strict disciplinarian. So as she appeared before him and explained what was going on, she said, "I'm leaving." And he responded, "Well, fine, leave." And so she just kind of thought to herself, well, he doesn't even care whether I go or not. And so as she got up to leave, he added, "But if you do, the afflictions of the mind will always follow you." So she went back to her room, and she pondered over that for some time, and she made a vow to stay. But she realized that she couldn't keep doing what she'd been doing, so that she was going to change her meditation practice. And so she started reading some books in the library, in the monastery library. And she found some books by some Tibetan masters. And they taught her two things. And this is what she records. She writes later. First, they said there is nothing to get and nowhere to go. They explained that awakening is actually inherent in human beings, and that love and compassion and freedom are accessible here and now. They also helped me to see that self-hatred was fueling my practice. I wanted to reach some kind of enlightenment so badly because, truthfully, I didn't want to be me. But my biggest recognition was that it was time for me to stop the doing. It was time for me to relax, stop trying so hard, and recognize the natural awareness and goodness already inherent in my being and in all beings. It was time simply to rest in awareness itself. So she started opening herself to realizing these two important things that she just learned. And one of the things that she would do after she changed her meditation and her approach to meditation, she would go out to a local lake every evening, and she would just cry. She would just cry and let herself go. And so after about a month or so, to her surprise, the crying over a little period of time just stopped. She just stopped crying and she started feeling better. And she continued her practices with a new relish and a new kind of energy that really transformed how she saw herself and how she was experiencing her life in the monastery. Well, eventually she came back to the US and she became a meditation teacher, and she teaches at Spirit Rock, which is a Buddhist meditation center here in Northern California. And she also felt very strongly that she wanted to educate people on this idea of mindful awareness. So she became the education director for the UCLA Mindful Awareness Research Center. And so she's also the author of several books about awareness. And now she has a daughter. And in her latest book, which is titled The Little Book of Being, she writes that her most challenging and rewarding practice involves trying to mindfully parent an 8-year-old. And I'm guessing that many of you have been through that experience. I know I have. And parenting is truly one of the most challenging things that we go through in this human experience. So that's the first thing about spiritual freedom, is to awaken to who we truly are. But for me, there are two parts of this process. And that is not only awakening, but to share that awakening with the world. To know that who I am is a gift. And when I am my authentic, loving self, that I have a gift to offer the world. Now, sometimes in our culture, we react to this kind of awareness in a way that that is not at all helpful. Oops. Oops. Did I stop screen sharing?
Not yet.
Okay. I am having a challenge figuring out how to do that. Let's see, here we go.
There, it's working.
Okay.
No, it went
how's
away.
that?
No, it went
Okay,
away.
great, thank you.
No,
That's
it-
what it was supposed to do.
You stop
Okay, can
sharing.
you see me
you
now?
stopped sharing. No, we can't see it. It didn't work. We saw it
Okay,
and then
no,
it
I
disappeared.
I wanted to stop sharing. I wanted
Oh,
to
you
stop
weren't sharing. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking us if we could see your screen, and I was saying no, you hadn't been sharing.
Okay. All right. So anyway, so sometimes when we get this idea that that we're to share our gifts, like that cartoon figure there, we say, you know, how can I become the other? That's that's not the idea, of course. And so there are many people who think that this is what our intention is, or what our purpose here is, and that is not only to know who we truly are, but to become aware of that. Nelson Mandela, for one, says, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." And bodhisattvas in the Buddhist tradition are enlightened beings who have put off entering paradise in order to help others attain enlightenment. So a really powerful kind of expression of who they truly are. And it's an intention that all of us can aspire to. But my favorite way of saying that is the way that Ram Dass says it. And he just says, we're all here just to walk each other home. And I really love that. And that's one of the hallmarks of my own personal credo. We're all just here to walk each other home. So let me tell you another story. This is a story about Greg Boyle. And so Greg was born and raised in Los Angeles. He was raised Catholic. He was called to the priesthood, and he became a Jesuit priest. And so at the conclusion of his studies of theology and the priesthood, and he became ordained. He spent a year living at his first assignment, which was working with a Christian community in Bolivia, which was a very poor community and quite challenging work. So, but upon his return in 1986, he was made the pastor of Dolores Mission in Boyle Heights in East Los Angeles. So he returned to his city of origin. And at that time, that parish was the poorest Catholic church in the city. And it was also located between two large public housing projects, two of the largest housing projects in the country. And it stood amidst the stomping grounds of numerous gangs who, needless to say, often competed with each other. And there was a lot of gang violence there. So Father Boyle witnessed the devastating impacts of this gang violence on this community for some time. It really was quite horrifying. So much so that they called a certain part of it the Decade of Death that was in the late 1980s and peaked in 1992 with over 1,000 gang-related killings. It really was horrific, and some of you might remember that time. So in the face of police tactics and policies, justice policies of suppression and mass incarceration as a means to end the gang violence, Father Boyle and the people in the parish and some community members around there adopted what was at that time a really radical approach to this problem, that they wanted to treat gang members as human beings. And the motto that they worked with at that time was, we imagine a world without prisons, and then we try to create that world. So Father Boyle tells the story of Frank, who was one of the local homeboys who had just recently been released from prison. And so Frank came to see him at his office. And of course, the first thing that Father Boyle noticed about Frank is that he had a huge tattoo across his forehead that said, "Fuck the world." And so Frank comes in to see Father Boyle and he says, I'm having trouble finding a job. And after kind of quietly smiling to himself, Father Boyle responds and says, well, maybe we can put our heads together about this. And so what that prompted was a dedication to a program called Jobs for the Future. And so they established an alternative school and a daycare program, and right away about a program so that would remove tattoos and supporting these gang members and former prisoners into finding legitimate employment. They called it Jobs for the Future. So over the years, that program evolved into the establishment of what is now known as Homeboy Industries. And so Homeboy Industries is a program that is designed for former gang members and recently incarcerated people who have been freed for a variety of free programs. Certainly tattoo removal, mental health counseling, legal service, education, work readiness training, and employment service. So it's really a whole program to help people to re-entry from after they've been in prison. And so a distinctive aspect of the Homeboy Industries is that it has a structure that's based on social enterprise and social business. So it helps these former gang members and former inmates to acquire job skills and seek employment in a safe, supportive environment. So they have now a host of businesses: Homeboy Bakery, Homegirl Cafe. I get all touched at this. Homeboy Girl Merchandise, Homeboy Farmers Markets, the Homeboy Diner at City Hall, Homeboy Groceries. And so over the years, Homeboy Industries has grown into the world's largest organization that's designed for reentry for formerly incarcerated and gang-involved individuals. And in 2014, Homeboy Industries went worldwide when it launched the global Homeboy Network. So what started in 1998 as a way of improving the lives of former gang members in East Los Angeles has become a blueprint for over 400 organizations around the world. Places like from Alabama to the States to Idaho, and internationally from places like Guatemala to Scotland. And what their goal is to be a positive alternative to the prison industrial complex throughout the world. And so the Global Homeboys Network works to widen what we would call the truth. And that is that we are naturally loving beings, that we have compassion, and that we are related to one another. Now you might be thinking, like I was when I learned about the priest and this whole movement, that he must be a pretty amazing guy. You know, I feel pretty confident that I can say that he probably has the view that he is just being what Spirit has called him to be. And so I'd like for you to be able to experience him. So I have a real short video here that you can get a feel for who Father Boyle is. Oops, am I sharing my screen now?
Not yet.
Okay. Sorry about that. How about now?
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like you need to rewind. Is that where the point in the video where you wanted to start?
It's at
Yes.
0.
Yeah.
Should be.
People always ask
No
me,
sound. Can you turn it up a little?
I'm ready. And I'll say, okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but
So is this full screen?
Yeah, it's pretty. It's good. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, go.
people always ask me about enemies who work together. It's kind of tense at first. Homie will come in and say, I'm ready, I'm ready. And I'll say, okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but you have to work with X, Y, and Z. And I rattle off the names of rivals. And they always say the same thing. They always say, I'll work with them, but I'm not going to talk to them. But, you know, it used to bother me in the early days. But, you know, the truth is, human beings can't demonize people they know. It's hard to sustain that. So I had a homie named Youngster, a little tiny guy. Everybody called him Youngster. And I thought he was ready, so I bring him into the Homeboy Silkscreen factory, and I introduce him to all his 30 co-workers. It's our biggest business, huge factory. And I watch him as he shakes hands with everybody, looking them in the eyes, even enemies, until he gets to the last guy, a guy everybody called Puppet. Puppet seems to be avoiding this encounter altogether. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they kind of mumble something. They stare at their shoes. They don't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies, but he just finished shaking hands with other enemies. I discover later that this is a hatred that's quite personal and deep, beyond which neither of them think they can get past. So I sense that at the moment, and I say, hey, if you guys can't hang working together, let me know. I got a bunch of people who want this stuff. And they say nothing. 6 months later, Puppet is walking to a corner store not far from his home and buys something. But on the way home, he kind of takes a detour, shortcut, cuts into an alley. Suddenly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1. They beat him badly. He falls to the ground. While he's lying on the ground, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lying there lifeless. Somebody finds his body, takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. So it's policy there to keep you connected to machines for 48 hours. So the doctors can get 2 days of a flat fee. Then they sign the death certificate. This allowed family and friends to gather. I was in St. Louis University giving a talk. I flew home. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many, many times in size. It was horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. So at the end of the 48-hour period, I gave him a blessing. I anointed his forehead with oil. We disconnected. And a week later, I buried him. But in the first 24 hours, I'm alone in my office. It's 8:30 at night. The phone rings, and it's Youngster from the silkscreen factory, Puppet's coworker. Hey, he says, that's messed up about what happened to Puppet. I said, yeah, it is. And then with a certain kind of eagerness, even, he says, is there anything I can do? Can I give him my blood? And we both fall silent under the weight of it. So finally, he breaks the silence, choking back his tears, and he says with great deliberation, he was not my enemy. He was my friend. We worked together. Now, can I say that always happens at Homeboy Industries? Yeah. Any exceptions? No. And it shouldn't surprise us that God's own dream come true for us, that we be one. Just happens to be our own deepest longing for ourselves. It turns out it's mutual.
So I think that gives you a little bit of a feel of who Father Boyle is. And I think he's really clear that he's just being who God intends him to be. And that when you are that, the world acts and shows up in the most profound ways. So I'll just conclude with this one thought from Meister Eckhart, the medieval mystic. He says, God expects but one thing of you, and that is that you should come out of yourself in as far as you are a created being and let God be God in you. God bless you, friends.